I lost everything because of my own brother. My job, my reputation, my future. And the worst part? He did it on purpose. My name is Elena, and I was the unwanted child in my family. My younger brother Jason was the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. My parents spoiled him rotten, while I had to fight for every scrap of recognition. It started small when we were kids. Jason broke my toys, and I got blamed for not sharing. He failed his classes, and I was told to tutor him because he just needed a little help. When he crashed my first car, the one I worked 2 years to buy, my parents paid for the repairs without a second thought. But when I asked them to help me with college tuition, they told me to take out loans. Fine. I worked 2 jobs, put myself through school, and earned a degree in business. Jason, meanwhile, flunked out of college twice, but my parents kept making excuses for him. He's just figuring things out, they said. You were always the responsible one, Elena. He needs more support. Support. Right. By the time I was 28, I had a stable career at a top marketing firm. I worked my way up from an intern to a senior strategist. I rented a nice apartment, had good friends, and was finally building a life of my own. Jason? He was still mooching off my parents, living rent-free in their house, bouncing between failed business ideas. Then, everything changed. One morning, my boss, Lauren, called me into her office with a smile. Elena, I have great news. The company is expanding and we're looking for a new regional director. You're my top pick for the position. I was stunned. It was a massive promotion. More responsibility, higher pay, and a chance to prove myself. I could hardly contain my excitement as I called my parents that evening to share the news. But they barely reacted. Instead, my mother sighed. That's nice, dear. But Jason is struggling right now. He lost another job, and he's been really down. Of course, Jason's failures always overshadowed my achievements. Still, I wasn't going to let that ruin my moment. I spent weeks preparing for the final interview, perfecting my presentation. This was my chance. My future depended on it. Then, disaster struck. The night before my big presentation, I got an email from my boss. Elena, after reviewing your recent communications, we've decided to withdraw our offer. We cannot consider you for this position at this time. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. What communications? What was she talking about? I rushed to my inbox and found an email I had supposedly sent to the CEO. It was full of insults about the company, calling my boss incompetent and unfit for leadership. It was cruel, it was unprofessional, and it was fake. I didn't write that email. Panicked, I called Lauren, trying to explain that someone must have hacked my account, but the damage was done. The company couldn't risk promoting someone involved in internal sabotage. My reputation was in shambles. I felt sick. My hands trembled as I racked my brain, trying to figure out who would do this to me. And then, it hit me. Jason. He was the only one who knew about my promotion before the announcement. He had access to my laptop whenever I visited home, and he always resented my success. I stormed into my parents' house that night, my blood boiling. Jason was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. You did this, I spat. He barely looked up. Did what? The email, you sabotaged me. Jason smirked, tossing his phone aside. Oh, that. Yeah. Sucks, huh? My head spun. Why, Jason? Why would you do this to me? His smirk widened. Because I'm sick of you acting like you're better than me. You always win. You always get ahead. This time, I made sure you lost. I clenched my fists. You ruined my career. Jason shrugged. You'll be fine. You always land on your feet. My parents, who had overheard the conversation, rushed in. Elena, calm down, my mother said. Jason made a mistake, but he's your brother. You'll get another job. I stared at her in disbelief. They knew. They knew and didn't care. My father sighed. He's struggling, Elena. You were always strong. He needs more help than you. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I had spent my entire life being the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who sacrificed everything. Not anymore. I took one last look at Jason, his smug face still infuriatingly relaxed. He thought he won, but he had no idea what I was about to do next. I wish I could say my parents finally saw Jason for who he was. I wish I could say they apologized, that they begged for my forgiveness. But that's not how my family worked. After Jason admitted to ruining my career, my mother simply sighed. Elena, you're overreacting. It was a mistake. He didn't mean any harm. Didn't mean any harm? I had lost everything because of him. I turned to my father, waiting for him to step in. He didn't. He just rubbed his temples, like I was the problem. Look, what's done is done. You can't change it now. Jason smirked from the couch, completely at ease, as if he hadn't just destroyed my future. And that was when my mother said the words that finally broke me. You're always so dramatic, Elena. Why can't you just support your brother for once? I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Support him? After everything he had done to me? I could feel my hands shaking, my breath coming out in sharp bursts, the weight of years of being cast aside, ignored, and expected to sacrifice for Jason crushed down on me all at once. I had been a fool to think they would ever take my side, so I made a decision right then and there. I was done. Without another word, I turned and walked out of that house. My parents didn't follow me. Jason didn't call after me. It was as if I had never existed. For the next few weeks, I struggled to pull my life back together. Losing that promotion meant I had no safety net. My industry was competitive, and thanks to the fake email, my name had been tarnished. No one wanted to hire me. Meanwhile, Jason continued living comfortably, spending money that wasn't his, partying every weekend while I scrambled to make ends meet. The worst part? My parents still expected me to help him. My mother called one afternoon, as I sat in my tiny studio apartment, eating instant noodles because I couldn't afford anything else. Elena, I need a favor, she said, as if nothing had happened. I nearly laughed. What favor? Jason is thinking about starting a business. He has some great ideas, but he needs funding. Since you're so good with money, we were hoping you could lend him some. I almost dropped my phone. They wanted me to give Jason money? The same Jason who had sabotaged my career? The same Jason who had never worked a real job in his life? I should have just hung up. I should have blocked her number then and there. But I needed to hear it. I needed to hear just how deep their favoritism ran. You do realize I'm unemployed because of him, right? I said slowly, forcing my voice to stay calm. My mother scoffed. Oh, Elena, you'll find another job. You always do. Jason, on the other hand, just needs a little help. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Mom, Jason doesn't need help. He needs consequences. She gasped like I had just cursed at her. I didn't raise you to be so selfish. Selfish? That was it. I exhaled sharply, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. You know what, Mom? You're right. I always land on my feet. And I will again. But don't call me for help when Jason finally crashes. I ended the call. And then I started planning. A week later, I got a call from my cousin Ben. Elena, you won't believe this, he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. What now? I asked, exhausted. Jason is bragging that your parents are going to put the house in his name. I sat up so fast my vision blurred. They what? Ben sighed. Yeah. Apparently your dad's been talking about updating their will. Jason convinced them that he should inherit the house because, and I quote, Elena's always been independent. She doesn't need it. I was speechless. It wasn't about the house itself. I didn't want to live there. But the principle of it? They were about to hand Jason everything while I was left with nothing. Ben hesitated before adding, I overheard him talking to his friends. He's already planning to sell it once he gets ownership. That was my breaking point. Jason had spent his entire life getting away with everything, and my parents had spent theirs letting him. But this time, he was going to pay. I was going to take everything from him. And he would never see it coming. I spent my entire life watching Jason get away with everything. But this time, I was going to make sure he lost. For weeks, I played the part of the defeated older sister. I let my parents believe I had moved on. I even reached out to Jason, pretending to forgive him. It wasn't easy. Every word that came out of his mouth made my blood boil, but I kept my voice light. I needed him to trust me, because I was about to set him up for the biggest fall of his life. Jason's latest scam was his business venture. He claimed he was launching a luxury streetwear brand, which, in Jason's world, meant printing cheap t-shirts and selling them for triple the price. The only problem? He had no money. That's where I came in. One night over drinks, I leaned in, lowering my voice like I was about to share a big secret. You know, I actually have some connections in marketing, I said. If you're serious about your brand, I could introduce you to some people. Jason's eyes lit up. For real? I nodded. Of course. But investors won't take you seriously unless you show them you're committed. You need capital, something to prove you believe in your own idea. Jason sat back, rubbing his jaw. Man, I would invest, but you know how it is. Money's tight. Bingo. He was exactly where I wanted him. I tilted my head, pretending to think. Well, there's one option. Didn't Mom and Dad say they were putting the house in your name? Jason grinned, cocky as ever. Yeah, it's basically mine at this point. I smiled back. Then why not take out a business loan? Use the house as collateral. It's a win-win. You get the money now, and once the brand blows up, you pay it off easily. Jason actually believed it. By the end of the week, he had secured a massive loan, using my parents' house as collateral, without telling them. He thought he was making a power move. He thought he was playing the game. But I was the one holding all the cards. A few days later, I invited Jason and his friends to an upscale networking event, one I told him was full of potential investors. In reality, it was a setup. I had hired actors to play investors, business owners, and even a high-profile fashion mogul. I needed Jason to believe he was rubbing shoulders with the elite. And he fell for it. Hard. I watched as he bragged about his revolutionary streetwear brand, talking big numbers and future expansions. My investors nodded, humoring him, letting him dig his own grave. Then, at just the right moment, I excused myself, walked to the bar, and made a phone call. To the bank. Hello, I'd like to report a fraudulent loan taken out under false pretenses. The moment I hung up, I knew Jason's world was about to come crashing down. 2 days later, Jason called me in a full-blown panic. Elena, I need your help. It's bad. I leaned back in my chair, suppressing a smile. What happened? The bank called. They're saying there was an issue with my loan. Something about an audit. If I don't pay back a chunk of it now, they're going to seize the house. I feigned concern. Wow, that's rough. Jason let out a frustrated groan. You have to help me. You know investors. Maybe you can get me an advance or something? I let a silence stretch between us before saying, I did warn you about needing real capital. Maybe you should ask Mom and Dad. Jason's breathing grew ragged. I can't. They don't know I use the house for collateral. There it was. The real fear. He wasn't just afraid of losing money. He was afraid of my parents finding out he had gambled their home away. And then, I twisted the knife deeper. Jason, do you remember when you destroyed my career? My voice was calm, almost conversational. There was a beat of silence, then a nervous chuckle. Come on, that's different. I leaned in. No, it's not. Elena, I cut him off. I'm done saving you. I heard the panic in his voice. Wait. Elena, please. If the bank forecloses, Mom and Dad will lose everything. I smirked. Then maybe they should have supported the right child. Jason screamed my name, but I had already hung up. And then I blocked his number. Jason thought he was untouchable. He spent his entire life manipulating, lying, and getting away with it. My parents always bailed him out, always defended him. But this time, there was no escape. The morning after I hung up on Jason, I got a call from my mother. Elena, you need to help your brother. The bank is threatening to seize the house. I leaned back in my chair, twirling my coffee mug. Oh? And why would that be? My mother hesitated, then lowered her voice like she was embarrassed. He made a mistake. A small one. But this is serious, Elena. We could lose everything. A small mistake? Jason had gambled away their house. I sighed, feigning sympathy. That's awful. But Mom, I thought you said Jason was responsible? That he deserved the house? She bristled. This isn't about that. We are a family. And family helps each other. I nearly laughed. Family? That word had never applied to me. Not when they ignored my achievements. Not when they excused Jason's betrayal. And definitely not now. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice calm. When Jason destroyed my career, you told me to move on. But now that his own actions have ruined his life, I'm suddenly responsible? Elena, don't be difficult. I'm not. I'm just finally playing by the rules you set. I ended the call. And then the real fun began. That afternoon, I sent an anonymous tip to a local journalist. I made sure they got all the juicy details: Jason's fraudulent loan, his reckless spending, and most importantly, how he had put his own parents' home at risk. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. The next morning, headlines started circulating online. Local business entrepreneur exposed. Family home at risk due to reckless spending, fraud, or failure. True story behind this luxury brand scam. By noon, the news had reached my parents. My phone rang again. My mother's name flashed on the screen, followed by Jason's. I ignored them. Then, at exactly 3 p.m., my cousin Ben texted me. You need to check Facebook, now. I clicked the link he sent and nearly dropped my phone. Jason had posted a public meltdown. It was a desperate, rage-filled rant, blaming me for everything. My sister is a bitter, jealous loser who couldn't stand to see me succeed. She set me up. She tricked me into taking the loan and then leaked everything to the media. She wants to destroy my life because she never had one of her own. The comments section? An absolute disaster. People weren't buying his lies. So let me get this straight. You stole her career, took her inheritance, and now you're mad because she outplayed you? Lamau, this is the most pathetic woe is me speech I've ever seen. Jason, you got yourself into this mess, and now you're crying because your sister stopped cleaning it up for you? I sat back, watching his world collapse in real time. But the best part? His meltdown had caught the attention of his lenders. That evening, Jason and my parents showed up at my apartment. I heard the furious knocking before I even got to the door. I took my time answering. The moment I opened it, my mother stormed in. Elena, what the hell have you done? Jason stood behind her, looking nothing like the arrogant brother I once knew. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot, and for the first time in his life, he looked truly afraid. I crossed my arms. I don't know what you mean. Jason's voice cracked. They're coming for me. I raised an eyebrow. Who? The bank. The lenders. Everyone. His hands shook. They're going to seize the house and I might be under investigation. I tilted my head. Well, that does sound serious. My mother grabbed my arm, shaking me. You did this. You turned on your own family. I yanked my arm free. No, Mom. Jason did this. You let him. And now you're paying the price. Jason fell to his knees, desperation written all over his face. Elena, please. You can fix this. You have connections. You can make the story go away. He was begging me. The same brother who had ruined my career. The same parents who had cast me aside. I stared down at him, feeling nothing but satisfaction. And then I said the words that sealed his fate. Jason, I have a better idea. Why don't you do what you told me to do? Just move on. His face crumpled. My mother gasped. You don't mean that. I smiled. Oh, I do. Then I stepped back, slammed the door in their faces, and locked it. Jason screamed my name, but I never looked back. Jason was finished. His scam had unraveled, his lenders were after him, and now he was on the verge of losing everything, including our parents' house. And the best part? There was nothing he could do to stop it. For days, Jason and my parents kept calling. They begged. They threatened. They even tried guilt-tripping me into fixing the mess he created. But I ignored them all. Then, one afternoon, I got a text from my cousin Ben. Jason is at the bank with Mom and Dad. They're trying to stop the foreclosure. You might want to come see this. I didn't hesitate. I wasn't about to miss the final act of Jason's downfall. When I arrived at the bank, I spotted them instantly. My parents were arguing with a loan officer, looking frantic. Jason sat hunched in a chair, his face pale and drenched in sweat. He looked nothing like the arrogant brother who had ruined my life. I stepped forward, making sure he saw me. His eyes widened. Elena! He jumped up and grabbed my arm. Thank God, you have to help me. I raised an eyebrow. Help you? Jason nodded desperately. You have contacts. You can talk to them. Convince them to delay the foreclosure. Just a few more weeks? I tilted my head. So you can do what? Scam someone else for money? He flinched. I'll fix it. I just need time. I leaned in, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason, the time for fixing things was before you sabotaged me, before you stole from our parents, before you made your own bed. Jason's grip on my arm tightened. Please, Elena, I'll do anything. That's when I delivered the final blow. I smiled coldly. You already did, Jason. You gave me the greatest gift of all, watching you destroy yourself. And with that, I pulled my arm free and turned my back on him. Minutes later, the bank manager delivered the final verdict. The house was being repossessed. Jason's legs buckled, and for the first time in his life, he collapsed in defeat. My mother turned to me, eyes blazing. Elena, you could have stopped this. I met her gaze evenly. No, Mom, you could have stopped this. If you had held Jason accountable, just once, none of this would have happened. My father stepped forward. Elena, please. He's your brother. I laughed softly. He's your mistake. And with that, I walked away. 1 week later, I heard through Ben that Jason had lost everything. The house was gone. The business was a failure. And the lenders? They were still coming after him. My parents? They finally saw Jason for what he was, but it was too late. Jason tried reaching out one last time. He sent me an email with just 3 words. I'm sorry, Elena. I stared at the message for a long time before finally replying. I moved on. You should too. Then, I deleted it, blocked his email, and never looked back. That weekend, I celebrated. Not because I had destroyed Jason, but because I had finally freed myself from him. For the first time in my life, I was no longer the forgotten child, no longer the one sacrificing everything. I was the one who won. What would you do if the person who destroyed your life came crawling back, begging for help? Would you forgive them, or let them face the consequences? Comment 1 if you think Jason got exactly what he deserved. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more shocking revenge stories. There's plenty more where this came from.